All right, here we go. All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest tonight back to the show. He is an author, he's a researcher, he's a friend of the show. He came on early on. It's none other than Carter Buschardt. Welcome back to the show, Carter.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. It's been a while since we've talked, and I know you've had some interesting things going on. You've been writing books and talking to folks. So let's just get right into it. Tell us, since the last time you were on, we got into some of the evidence of an enigma and talked about some of the wilder aspects of the Bigfoot thing. So why don't you tell the audience what you've been up to since we talked last and what's going on in your life?
Okay. Well, this was the book I had just written, uh, Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma, when we first did the show. And then I started a second book, Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma 2. Pretty darn creative with the title there, huh? I thought long and hard about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the title.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I signed a book deal with Beyond the Fray Publishing, April or May or June of this year. I can't remember, a few months back. And so this is the book that's out now, and it is basically Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma, but it's been renamed. It's Sasquatch Down the Rabbit Hole of Strangeness. And what I did was they did a whole new cover, and there is an extra chapter and about 10 extra pages on top of that. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. They want me to do two books. And so what I've done is redone this book, Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma 2. And I think it's going to have the same cover, but it's going to have Down the Rabbit Hole of Strangeness as its new title. I'm trying to refresh it. And they've added almost 100 pages to this one because the very unique witness I have up in Canada is just gushing forth with bizarre events. I mean, just they're paranormal for sure. They're quantum, perhaps. Abstract. However you want to categorize it, but there's stuff going on there that is not of the dumb ape in the woods legion. So it's just really bizarre. So, and I heard when I did the first book, which was kind of like A to Z, so the first one, Sasquatch Enigma, was just really, if you had just had a glancing interest or glancing exposure to Sasquatch, it's kind of from A to Z, starting from scratch. I get into counting. Sasquatch can count. There's structures, some of the paranormal, abstract, quantum type things that people are reporting, vibrational frequency, discharge, and cloaking and all that stuff. So when I did that, I started doing shows like yours and some others. I started getting emails from people. Oh my God, I have to talk to you. No one will talk to me. They're laughing at me and ridiculing me. And I can't even call BFRO because they look at me funny. So I started getting all these people. Well, there's like 16, 17 people contacting me off the first book, and half of them are in the second one. I'm going crazy, but people ridicule them or scoff at them or try to find other explanations, and they're saying, no, that's not what I saw. What I saw is what I just told you. So I'm like the sounding board and the soft place to land for a lot of these folks is they can't they can't talk to anybody. So that's what's adding so many chapters to this book. It's crazy. It's crazy. And you probably hear some bizarre things on your paranormal side.
Yeah, I definitely do. And I want to get into that because I've had so many people on the show on the Sasquatch side of the thing. And we talked a little bit about it when you were on before. There's so many different stories and people are having these experiences. And I used to write it off to coincidence, right? Like, oh, they're having lights, they're having UFO experiences. And then there's the Sasquatch thing and the orbs and all of those things. But the more I've talked to other people and had other people on the Paranormal Odyssey, I believe all these things are connected in some way now. It's fascinating to me that people are having these experiences. I just had Preston Dennett on this past week, and Preston's been studying UFOs, and he's also had a Bigfoot encounter. And Preston kept telling me that the more he's researched this since I think 1986, everything is connected. He kept saying that to me, Brian, everything is connected. And I'm like, well, you
If
know.
I got a segue for you for that story right there. In my book, one of the people that connected it with me was a gentleman up in the Northeast, New England states area. And he is a self-made man. He does quite well. He has a business that thrives. And so, and he and his wife lived out in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, really. And she got pregnant. They had a baby. The little 2-bedroom cabin they had was not big enough. So he decided to add on to their cabin and basically double the size. So, and they'd had a few Sasquatch events before the one I'm about to tell you. So they weren't a stranger to it. You know, one night her wife had called him, couldn't get a hold of him, called the cops. Said there's a giant man running around, stomping on the ground outside the house, and he won't leave. Well, the cops got there. Of course, there was nothing, but something had ripped the steel siding off the cabin and flipped it up, which is probably not possible with a human. But anyway, and then he had another time where he had seen a Sasquatch and another Sasquatch, probably a juvenile, watching him mow from on top of the neighbor's hill, which was next to his property. He just saw them. He'd heard of them. He was aware, but he never had like the visual like that. So they were aware of them. So anyhow, he's got a 32-foot travel trailer he keeps on his property. And when they started redoing the house, he sent his wife off to stay with her parents, which is about 25 miles away. So they'd be comfortable because they had the utilities off at the house where they're working on. So anyhow, he ran his business till about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He'd come home and then he'd meet the contractors over there in the guys, and he would get them going and you know, doing all the things that they wanted to get done. Right. Anyway, so one night he's there about 10 o'clock. And he hears a bunch of noise. Now, and he's got a 125-pound police trained German Shepherd. It's a watchdog, guard dog. It is trained to attack unmercifully upon a command. So, and living out in the middle of nowhere, you know, I understand. So anyway, it's a big badass dog, you know, but he heard some noise and he heard some rumbling around in the woods, and he was, you know, shining his light and he couldn't see anything. A lot of big trees there. And long story short, he's starting to pack up all the tools before he goes to bed in the travel trailer. So he finally gets almost the tools all the way done. He's standing in front of his cabin and he sees, because there's a light and there's a little ambient light from the moon, and there's, you know, he's got a pole light up there that comes on. And he sees a Sasquatch, a pretty good sized one, 8-9 foot tall, as far as he could tell, walking right at him and the dog. This attack trained police dog that he spent a lot of money on just stood there. It didn't growl, it didn't cower, it just stood there and looked straight ahead like he was just locked in on it, but he did nothing. And so the Sasquatch keeps coming at him. And he's backing up. He's going, this ain't good. I got to get out of here. This isn't going to be good. So they run and get into the travel trailer. And they bolt the door, and you can see the Sasquatch walking around the outside of the travel trailer. It's looking in the window, and you can see the silhouette. And every now and then the light hits it from outside. He sees this thing, and he's going, "Oh my God, I got in here. I left my gun in the cabin. I don't have anything." So he goes to the kitchen and gets a carving knife, you know, about a foot long knife. And so him and the dog run and barricade themselves in the bathroom in this travel trailer. Well, you know how big those are. Room for one person, maybe, you know. So, and he's sure that this Sasquatch is going to come get him. And the dog the whole time is not alerting or doing anything. It's just kind of following him around because he doesn't know what to do. He's kind of like in some kind of trance or something. He's just not his normal self. So they get in the door, lock the bathroom, and he's standing at sitting on the floor with his knife, pointing at the door, just waiting for this thing to burst through. He knew it was going to happen. And the dog is sitting right next to him. It's pressed up next to him. It's pushing him. So he knows he's a little afraid. He wakes up at 5:30 in the morning. He had 6 hours. This happened at 11:30. He had 6 hours of missing time. He woke up in the same position, like it had happened 5 seconds ago. And the dog was next to him, sitting up, staring straight ahead. I mean, it's still in this kind of a trance. But dogs don't sleep sitting up. They just don't. So he was in a trance. And the only thing that woke him up was hearing the construction guys pulling up to his house, and his wife pulling up to his house, because every morning she'd come over and cook him breakfast before he went to work. That was their little date. Then she went back home with the guys work on the house. So he gets out and he's refreshed. He's not tight from having his muscles sitting like this for 6 hours. He's just like, this just happened. I feel great. What's going on? And it's 5:30 in the morning. 6 hours gone. And he has no idea what happened. And I suggested, well, perhaps you want to try some regression hypnosis if you're really curious, because I have had something like that happen to me when I was 10 years old. I've had an ET experience when I was a kid, whole nother story. But I'm familiar with the process. I've been taken under 4 times. Twice by Dolores Cannon. I don't know if you know who she is or was. She passed away. She's one of the premier regression hypnotists in the world, and she passed away. She took me under twice, and 2 of her students took me under. So 4 times I got all these tapes, all this stuff happened. So I'm familiar. I said, well, you ought to just try it, because I tell you, the anguish of not knowing is a whole lot worse than finding out what it is and getting it over with. At least it's over. You're scared to find out. And that's what he says. I'm afraid to find out. I don't really want to know. And so he said, I've spent my entire life being boring. I don't want any of this kind of drama in my life. I don't know why it happened. I said, well, sometimes you just get chosen. That's just the way it is. They chose you for a reason, And so, but that's the UFO in my world, in Sasquatch world, even though I'm familiar with the, missing time, my world, you don't have missing time with the Sasquatch. But here is clearly a guy who had 6 hours missing, and he woke up in the same position he was when it was like it was a different dimension or something, because he was in the exact same position. The lights were on, everything was the same, nothing had changed. So I don't know how the paranormal guys or the UFO people, I know how they'd explain that when he was taken. So there could be, because I am hearing a lot since we spoke, that more and more people believe there is a correlation or a connection with Sasquatch and ETs. That's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story, and I go back and forth so many times with it, because I don't know what the connection is, right? I can't make the leap to, like some people say, that Bigfoot is like an alien's pet and they're dropping it off to go to the bathroom and picking it up later. And, I've talked to people that have had encounters with UFOs, and they've had this correlation with Bigfoot to the point of seeing a ship over a Sasquatch. Not necessarily coming, well, actually, one guy did tell me that he had an experience where somebody told him, he was doing an investigation, and the person he was investigating and dealing with told him they had an experience where they actually saw a Sasquatch getting onto a landed craft. And that's a mind-blowing thing for me, right? I have a very hard time rationalizing that, because my cop brain comes on and I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense to me. But the longer I've done these shows and the more people I've talked to, the more I've learned that I have to back away from that, because there's people that have told me things back episode 4 and 5 of this show when I started it. And I walked away from that interview going, there is absolutely no way that happened the way that they described it. But my philosophy has always been and continues to be, I don't have people on the show that I don't believe have had genuine encounters. I think a lot of people have genuine encounters and then they sort of progress, they add to, they embellish. And so I think some people clearly make things up, right? I don't think it's a very common thing, but I said all that to say there's things that have happened like and I've referred back to Dave a couple of times. I think it's the Bigfoot hunts with coyotes episode that I did. It was like episode 4 or 5 of the show. And Dave had some pretty out there stories, and he's telling me how he knows that Bigfoot hunts with coyotes. Every big male Bigfoot has 4 or 5 coyotes that are like their dogs. And I'm listening to him tell the story, and I'm thinking, he is full of shit. There's no way that that's true. And I even put in the intro of the show, I said, hey, I'm not necessarily saying all this is true. I'm going to leave it up for you guys to interpret and take away what you want. Well, I've had conversations with people since then, just recently, that have also had encounters where there are coyotes with Sasquatch and appear to be working with them. It's almost like this. It's confirming what he told me 6-8 months ago, and I thought he was crazy. So I've completely abandoned that. I have to tell the audience I don't think anybody's crazy anymore, frankly, because their experiences are theirs. They're real experiences, like this experience you just described with this guy having a Bigfoot encounter and then having 6 hours of lost time. How do you explain that?
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't. And the first thing when you said, I'm a rational guy, throw the rationale out of there, because you can't be rational anymore when you talk about this stuff. And rational is not a dirty word. I'm just saying you just have to have an open mind. And my whole thing, when I started hearing all these people, when I started doing this, I'll backtrack. The people that took me in, BFRO investigators and stuff like that, were all of the dumb ape in the woods thing. That's all they are. They don't have any powers. They can't do it. They're dumb ape in the woods, and that's all they are. And anything else is just hogwash, or to use a polite term, And so, but once I was leading an expedition for BFRO. Once I saw one vanish in front of my eyes about 11 o'clock at night while I'm watching through my thermal. It just walked across the trail and poof. The whole heat signature just went, and it looked like somebody had blown a Sasquatch smoke ring, because there was a little residue left on the outline of the creature, and it slowly dissipated in the night, and it was gone. Okay, I've got a very expensive FLIR thermal camera. It was working fine. I wasn't stoned. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't anything. I'm, realistically sane person, according to most people. I've never been found legally insane. So none of that stuff was a factor. What I saw was it. And that took me to the dark side, because you can only answer a very few questions with the theory that they're just an undiscovered ape. Other stuff, you start getting into the paranormal, quantum, esoteric things that, skill sets that these creatures just can't have. I've done so much research on this stuff that, I can find creatures in the sea, on land, in the air that can do many of the things, or have the skill set to do versions of some of these things, using the electromagnetic, birds guide themselves with the electromagnetic field of the, what's to say a creature that we know nothing about can't manipulate the electromagnetic currents flying through the air and create some of these things, and I've heard many people, I've stated this before, that Sasquatch and coyotes do have a symbiotic relationship. Not the one your guy was talking about, but I think, when the Sasquatch hear the coyotes packs howling, and they've got game cornered, they've got a meal cornered, Sasquatch will be the first one to run right over if they're close and snag the meal, because, well, hey, I'm bigger than you, and thanks for feeding me, and I don't have to go hunting. Well, the coyotes follow the Squatch around and get their leavings. They take down a deer, what have you. You hear of that often, and people that live on my habituation properties will tell me the same thing. Well, the Sasquatch obviously tore this deer apart, and then the next morning the coyotes were dragging body parts across the field, the soy field, and it was gone. So I know that's considerably possible. I mean, what your guy said was, I don't see why they couldn't. Number one, you can control the coyote because you're the alpha predator. You do what I say here. Your dinner and lunch. So I believe that's possible. Just because we're all taught how the world is from the day you exit the birth canal. You are taught, you are educated by a preconceived educational system, media, government. You're told how everything is. So when you see a creature, Sasquatch, UFO, orbs, oh, well, that's, you didn't see that. You must be mistaken. You must be crazy. You must be hallucinating. You must have been on drugs or something, or you saw a radio tower through the trees and thought it was an orb. It was really radio. They explain it all away, and said there's no such thing as UFOs. There's no such thing as Sasquatch. Oh, wait. We did lie about one thing. There are UFOs. We've been lying to the public for 80 years. Oh, and that's all. There's no such thing. So, oh, well, we did screw up. We did lie about that. It's the same with Sasquatch and all the other stuff. There's a whole nother world that we're just told doesn't exist. So if you do see or experience it, your first action is to discredit it. Go, well, that wasn't it. There was a guy in a galaxy, or I just saw a bear walking on its hind legs, or I saw a deer and I'm just mistaken, or whatever. So you talk yourself out of it and you go on about your day. So if you're not real curious about this subject, then you just chalk it up to that was weird and you go on. But if you're people like you and me and other people, other crazy people, we're like, there's something going on here. We can't just let this lie. The government's already lied about one thing and no telling what else they're lying about. Won't get into all that. But the paranormal aspect, why can't we find a Sasquatch? If it's just a dumb ape, we'd have one on a slab. We'd have a type specimen and be done. What is the big deal about that creature that they want to keep quiet? Paper companies, lumber companies, the government, science, they're the puppy dog of the government. We want our grant money. Oh, you want your grant money? Okay, you make sure you say there's no Sasquatch or you're dead meat. So here's your check. Oh, there's no Sasquatch. There's no evidence of such a thing. It's just a horrible, vicious circle. It's just I laugh about it. It's really not a laughing matter, but it's there's something going on in the world and they just don't want us to know what it is. Maybe I should say world, I should say the universe or our planet. Something is awry, And so I think they'll throw us a bone and say the Patterson Gimlin film is true. It's a real creature, or that's not a fake film. We'll do it that way. The film's correct. But other than that, we have to keep looking into it. Same kind of baloney they gave us with the Tic Tac videos. They said we're gonna have this big revelation. We're gonna government's gonna release a report, and oh yeah, we see them. We didn't make them. We don't know what they are. But other than that, we don't know anything. We'll get back to you. So they threw us a bone. It's just like, that's about what it's worth. That's what it feels like a little bit. So that's my theory on that. I can't poo-poo anything because we don't know. There's not one expert in the world that knows everything or anything about these creatures and beings. So you have to have an open mind and consider all the stuff like you did. You said I can't even poo-poo that anymore. I've got to keep an open mind with the coyotes as pets. I mean, why not? I hear it from 5 or 6 different people. There's something going on.
Yeah, when it's one person, it's like, okay, well, I can dismiss that as this guy may be a little off his rocker. But when I hear, like you said, from multiple people that have had different experiences, I'm like, there's got to be something to that. Is his story 100% true? I don't know, but maybe there's something to what he said, and maybe there was some embellishment, or whatever the case may be. It's like you said about throwing us a bone and finding one of these things. It's got to be tough for you, or at least it has been for me. There's weeks, 5 days out of 7, I say this is a flesh and blood creature. There's nothing woo woo about it. It is the big dumb ape. But there's those other couple of days of the week where I just don't know, and I leave my mind open to that. But I guess the thing is like you said, I go back and forth with why can't we find one? If it is just an animal, and then, there's a lot of that goes on. There's other cryptids. I don't really, there's no other way to put it. They're cryptid animals or cryptid beings or entities that people see that we haven't proven, right? So,
Yeah.
and Bigfoot just falls into that category, just happens to be like the king of all cryptids. But I go back and forth because I struggle sometimes with any of this being real, because I talk to so many people and I see so much evidence. And I've had just recently, I talked about it on another show, somebody that I know through the show faked some evidence and sent it to me. And it pissed me off. You
Yeah.
know, I got this evidence. It was all hyped up and, hey, I'm going to send you this video and it's got this crazy audio on it. And I'm like, okay, well, send it to me. You can trust me. I'm not going to play it for anybody or, whatever. I'm not just going to put it out on the show, but send it to me. I know people who can take a look at it and maybe figure out what it is. I just did a show with Dave Ellis and Julie Wrench. I was working on the audio before I started with you tonight. That'll be out in a couple of weeks. So I know people that can take a listen to this. And it was a video and it was like in slow motion and it was this really weird vocalization. And I'm like, well, that just don't sound right. So I called Doug Hychek and said, hey, Doug, will you take a look at this? I trust you. I trust your opinion. Can you tell me what you think about this? Well, I sent it over to Doug. Doug's been in television for 30 years. He knows if a video's been dubbed or audio's been dubbed, right?
Yeah.
He immediately came back with, that's fake. It's clearly dubbed audio. And I already knew, I just needed the confirmation. And like I said, I trust Doug implicitly. And I was pissed off. I'm like,
Yeah, I would be.
I know this guy's had genuine encounters. I know he has. I believe that with all of my heart. So why are you going to this next level to try to fool me? Like you want to use my show and me put out something that's fake and ruin my reputation, which I'm not going to do. I'm an honest person. I don't put people on I don't believe and so on and so forth. So, but just the fact that you start faking evidence and it just really pisses me off. And so it causes me then to have this like, if this guy's faking evidence, is anything he told me true? And then is anything anybody else has ever told me true? And I start going down that rabbit hole and I crawl into a hole for a couple of weeks and it just makes me want to stop doing the show. It makes me want to stop believing people.
Yeah. I don't let one jerk do that to you, because, I had the same thing. I investigated a guy and he sent me an awesome photo. He had a bona fide Sasquatch event down in Louisiana. Awesome photo, really. And if you look at it close, it is what it is. Then he started sending me pictures, dozens of pictures with half a dozen to a dozen red circles. Well, there's 4 Sasquatch in that tree. There's 6 Sasquatch in that tree. That's in my front yard. Look, you see them? I go, no. I see red circles. What's in there? I don't. Oh no! Look at this one here. There's a white one taking a brown one from behind. Don't you see it? I'm going. What are you talking about? So he went off I'm serious. That's a true story. And I'm going. And I've got the pictures. I've still got them in a file somewhere. And he's got a published report to BFRO. So he started off with a legitimate sighting. I have anti-tampering programs. I'm not smart like Hydrocheck, but I know enough to use it and go, well, you can tell if you got cut and paste and stuff in there. And so that wasn't the case, but he just went off the deep end because he was getting attention and it made him a celebrity around town. And he just started doing, that's my assumption because I couldn't think, I saw him and how he lived. I'm going, yeah, okay, you probably need some attention. I can get it. But I have probably 20 or 30 photos of at least 3 circles up to 7 or 8 or 10 of all these Sasquatch up in trees, and they're wearing clothes and carrying spears as some of his other. And so if I let that guy soil my nest for like everybody, but anything he says is dubious at best from now on forward. I don't even talk to the guy anymore. But so, yeah, people will disappoint the holy crap out of you. It's just really, it is disappointing, but you put a lot of work and effort into what you're doing, your show and my research and everything. You just, they're amusing to me now, because they're easy to see and you can laugh about the guy you just told me about probably in private conversations, but not when, you go, I remember 5 years from now, you'd be going, God, I remember that guy that faked all that evidence and you'll laugh about it. Now I laugh about this guy. My wife and I just howl about it sometimes because I show her the picture. She's going, What? Where's this white one taking a brown one from behind? He's bent over a tree down in the forest. What are you talking? You know, and so that's almost so comical you can't help but laugh, you know. But a lot of times the other stuff, it was just he was dead serious about it. He was taking advantage of our relationship, is what he was doing, you know, and trying to make a name for himself.
And I
And
guess
so,
that's what it boils down to. And I've had to be very careful of that from doing the show, because when 20 people were listening to the show, nobody gave a shit about my opinion. Well, now they do all of a sudden, right? It's, hey,
yeah,
let me send you this picture. Hey, let me send you this video. And I'm like, okay, I love to look at evidence. I'm not an expert in anything by a long stretch, but I do have a pretty wide reach, and the show has allowed me to meet a lot of people that I trust their opinions, and I
there
can
you
reach
go.
out to them and send it to them and see what they have to say.
Yeah,
I can call Jeff Meldrum up and say, hey, Doc, can you take a look at this picture? Or can I send you this and you give me your opinion? Sure, no problem. Well, and people do that, and I don't have a problem with that, but don't waste my time and don't waste other people's time with something that's faked, right?
hmm
But
and
I'll get
yeah,
off.
there's a lot of it. There is a lot of it, and you know, I was looking at some threads on a Facebook thing today, and there's a guy's got a new page up, and it's just another fairly typical Sasquatch Facebook page group. And oh, look at that, look at this, and look at it. Do you see this four Sasquatches standing over here? No, I don't. I see four stumps. I see some shadow. I mean, you know, so they want to be something, and he's getting all butthurt because he's not getting likes. And he can monitor, so he sees people are viewing it but not liking it. So he's getting all hurt and insulted because people aren't liking and uh, uh, liking his stuff and commenting on it. Well, if that's what you're concerned about, you're doing this for the wrong reason, dude. You know, I mean, you're looking for the prize. Everybody wants to be the first one. Everybody wants to be the one. To, you know, find the ultimate, you know, Patterson Gimlin film 2.0 or whatever. Well, that's your motivation. What the heck are you doing? You know, you're running a race with yourself, because you know there's so much hate and venom out there. Oh my God, Jesus, it makes it, you know, painful sometimes to even, you know, talk about Sasquatch, because you know there's people just hating on you because they don't like you, don't believe you. Well, you're getting attention and they're not. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's all about stroking egos and everything. It's not about the ultimate question is who or what are these beings and what are they doing here? That's all we got to know. You know, I don't care if I am the one or not. It's a bucket list thing for me. I want to answer that question now while I'm up here above terra firma, just in case there is no afterlife. I believe there is, but I want to know in the here and now, so I can see all the looks on everybody's faces and have all the conversations and all that kind of stuff, and just be so exciting, you know. So wonderfully exciting to have an answer for, well, an enigma. And that's not a plug, but it is. It's a cathartic thing. It's like what is going on, you know? So yeah, it's occupational hazard, but you know, I wouldn't let that guy ruin your casserole, because you know he's out. And, you know, all you gotta do is mention his name once, or just disconnect with him. You know, because you know, like you said, if you're gonna lie once, you're gonna do it forever and ever. I mean, how do I know? You know, after everything you send me, do I have to run through a program to find out if you're bullshitting me or not? Excuse my French.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I feel. And I've just sort of distanced myself, and I still get messages and stuff. I'm like, hey, busy, got a lot of things going on. But I like what you said about the answering the question. People look at me and doing the show, and it's an ego thing, right? You like doing the show because you have a big ego. Well, yeah, I do have a big ego. I've always had a big ego. I don't lie about that, right?
We all have
And
ego.
yeah, yeah. But I do the show because I believe that the stories that we hear on the show are important evidence,
Yeah.
anecdotal, albeit, but it's evidence. And I want to know what this is, just like you. I want to know what I've experienced myself. I want to know what I've heard. I want to know what I've experienced. I had a television show reach out to me recently, and they're actually coming up here in a couple of weeks to film a documentary. And it's not a Bigfoot show. It's another show about other things, but they're doing a show on me about the Bigfoot thing, right? So, and they asked me one of those questions during the interviews to get ready for the show was, are you trying to prove this to everybody? Is this your motivation, is to prove that Bigfoot's real? And I'm like, no, it's not at all. I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. It's about what I want to know for myself. You know,
Mhm.
I want the proof for myself that I believe these things exist is not enough for me. Belief is not enough. I need proof. You know,
Mhm.
I pointed to the Patterson Gimlin film in the past as evidence and proof. And my good friend Steve Cole says, Brian, that's not evidence. Well, I believe that it is. I believe it's
Mhm.
video, it's evidence, it's video, and I believe that that film is real. You know,
I do too.
but there's so many
It-
people that say it's not. You know, and but that to me is probably the best thing I have ever seen as far as evidence. Now, other people have produced better quality videos, better quality photos. There's been footprints and foot castings and all these things, but there's never been that one moment of anything that I can look at and say, that is absolutely a Bigfoot. That convinces me beyond all belief that it's real. I wanted that to be true with Todd Standing, right? When I watched his Discovering Bigfoot or whatever show that is on Amazon. And I watched it, and the more I looked at it, and I've called Todd out many times on the show. I've invited him on the show. He won't come on the show. I'm
Wonder
actually,
why.
I don't know. I'm interviewing Les Stroud
Mhm.
Wednesday. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm interviewing Les Stroud on Wednesday. And I'm going to have that conversation with Les because he's done a lot of work with Todd
Yeah,
and
it has.
I'm very curious. And Les has always been very forthright with, yeah, I'm not saying this guy's everything he's saying is true, because if these videos are real, that is absolutely the best definitive proof ever that Bigfoot exists. But you don't hear people talk about it a lot because I think a lot of people think it's fake. And I believe that Todd has had real, very much like we've talked about with other folks. I think he started out having very real encounters with these things and he saw what that did and it just wasn't enough. And he's continued to press the issue and come up with more and more and more and more.
Mhm.
But it is what it is. Let's get back to people that you've talked to that you believe, right? So, what we got off on a little tangent, which I
Oh,
didn't.
that's okay. That's what it's about. Some people are, we're not going to show them any incredible proof here, but we're going to talk about a lot of stuff that might lead you that way. So, but the- I've talked to several people. I'm going to show you one picture, which I don't think you've ever seen. It's in the book, so it's not like a secret.
I have actually seen that.
Have you? Did I show it to you?
No, somebody I've seen it online, I believe.
Yeah,
Somewhere.
it's been floating around. Well, it was in the book. I sent it to another host of another show, and I said, just don't post it until it comes out in the book. Well, I got posted with the time date stamp on it, but this is the real McCoy. The guy called me, said, I've got activity on my property, and would you want to come out and take a look? I said, yes, I would, And then he showed me that photo when I got there. Whoa. So the story was that he owns a chunk of land. He's a retired government worker. I can't say what, but he's got credentials at the wazoo. He doesn't do a lot of hunting because he's got some injuries from work-related stuff. So, but he likes to go out, and he's got about 30 or 40 cameras on a piece of land that is maybe at the most a half acre. He's got cameras taking pictures of cameras taking pictures of cameras. So if there's something going on, he's getting it. So the guy that he lets hunt his property was hunting. He was up in his blinds about 5 o'clock one afternoon. It's getting dark. He said, yeah, I'm gonna smoke another cigarette and I'll climb down. He's up in the blind smoking a cigarette. And I've been to that place and I sat in that blind one night looking for something, no action. He's sitting there and all of a sudden it is about 40 yards from that blind to the wood line. That's about 40 yards, yeah. He sees this Sasquatch walking up this side of this hill through a break in the woods, and it stops and kind of looks around and looks up and sees the guy sitting there. And he just turns left and walks along the tree line like, okay, I see, what are you going to do? But you're not going to do anything. You're a stupid human. So he walks right in front of the camera. And if you look closely on this picture, the background is slightly blurry, but the picture of the hand up close is not. He may have bumped the camera. So But this creature just walked off, looked back at him one time and just kept walking. And he said, guy said, you know, I had my bow. I couldn't do it because it looked like a man. I couldn't cock my bow. And I think if I had, it would have either come at me or run off. So, you know, so he just said, he just stood there dumbfounded. And so that's the picture the guy gave me off his trail cam. And he's got others, but that's the only one he'll let me see. So he's got the good stuff. You know, he just threw me a bone, you know, like the government does us with other stuff. He just threw me a bone. He's got other stuff. And I, you know, he's a sincere guy. He, you know, here's the thing with these people that I talk to, and you probably talk to them too. They don't want anything. They don't want any money. They don't want any identification. I don't want my, you know, their name and lights. They don't want their name, their location, their town, nothing. Fine with me. Everybody in this book is pseudonym. They got a different name. Bob and Carol is, you know, of somebody else, because they all got different names, different locations. It doesn't really matter what the location is. So they just want to get it off their chest and tell the story. And they're earth-shattering enough to them. You and I may have heard these things before. Maybe I've experienced them out in the field, whatever. But this is like a change of a lifetime for some of these people. Sometimes they've been affected 10, 20, 30 years they've sat on it before they got enough courage to come through. And so they hear somebody like we're talking right now, someone right now is going, oh my God, that sounds like what happened to us back in the 70s. Call this guy, call, you know, that's how it gets when you get out the information that's going on, and other people who are having these things. See, honey, I know there's other people out there like us. See, just call him. Call me. Call Brian, call somebody, you know, but you'll find someone to talk to who's not going to laugh at you. So, that guy, I believe, you know, my guy up in Canada is having, it's got everything from, oh gosh, I can't even think of the words now. I mean, the stuff he's described, you know, I'll say infrasound, you know, parallel universe, gosh, you know, vibrational frequency, changing your frequency so that you can put your hand through a wall and come back out with it. You know, he had a creature, Zap is the name of the guy, the Sasquatch has been with him for a while, put his hand through the wall in his cabin, touched him on his forehead, knocked him out, just like that. Zap. He was up above his body looking at himself. He was having an out-of-body experience. He thought he flatlined. He was pretty sure he was dead, and he was trying to figure out, how did I get down there? What's going on? He was a 21-year-old kid. He had been experiencing this stuff with his dad for a while, but he still had no concept really. I mean, they heard about Sasquatch, but he'd never seen one. There was all a lot of behind-the-scenes things going on that were just really bizarre and out of place, you know. And so the other Sasquatch that was with him during this event said, get up, get up. It was just a weak blow. You'll be fine. Get up. So he got up, and his body in his mind melded back together, and he's sitting there in his cabin going, blah, 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 what happened, you know? So, but when someone tells you stuff like that, you know, you're going, okay, buddy, let's get serious. You know, it's quantum physics, it's quantum math, it's, you know, vibrational frequencies, it's, you know, cloaking, it's perhaps a form of hypnosis, it's infrasound, it's something that they can do to manipulate the environment so that you think they're there and they're not, or you think they're not there and they really are, or they can do this, they can levitate, they can telekinesis, they can, I mean, you know. So I'm trying to think of it. I have a real good story from planting trees from deforestation. That's up there in British Columbia. I don't know if you got anything else you want to go after first, or it's very paranormal. He was 21, 22-year-old kid, and he worked for the Forestry Service up in Canada, British Columbia. So they go back and replant trees where they've deforested areas. You know, they cut down the old growth. And so they had about 12 guys on this crew. They divided up into two. You know, 6 guys went to this area. So what they did, they drove up until there's no roads, there's no nothing. They kept driving and driving and driving and going through some rough terrain. They finally ended up 25 miles back in the deep, deep forest. Anyway, They're out, and his 6 guys on his crew, they go to this one little area that's clear and it's closest to the van where they park. Then the 6 other guys were kind of the big macho, burly, macho hunter guys, and they wanted to go back over the hill and back into the deep woods to see if they could see some game, because there's no hunting, but they might come back later and hunt. So anyway, so they split up, and my guy is with his 6 guys, and all of a sudden they start seeing all these footprints on the ground, hundreds of bare footprints from 6 inches to 25 inches. Bare feet, they're Sasquatch, and they go giddy. It's like they all had laughing gas. They all started kind of walking around and go, oh, look at this one. Oh, look at, they were just delirious with joy. Something weird had just come over them, and they were just out of their minds with sheer ecstasy and looking at these footprints and all of this stuff and running amok and just acting real crazy, and the foreman was going, hey, come here. What's going on? In the meantime, the 6 guys that went over the hill into the deep woods, the macho guys, they come running back over the hill, screaming and yelling. And when they came over the hill, they could see these big aspen trees getting pushed back and forth. The trees were 100-foot tall, and something was moving the trees. There's no wind, but they see these guys and they're screaming bloody murder. And some of them had shoulder length or longer hair in ponytails. All of their hair was standing straight out, like you put your hand on a Van de Graaff generator. You put your hand on there in school, your hair will stand up and you get goosebumps and all that electronic, it's sucking electricity out of the air. Their hair was like stiff, hard as a rock, like hairspray stiff. When they got away from whatever it was they were thinking they were surrounded by, the hair stayed up. The foreman was pissed. He got them all in the van. They drove them to there's a local office, a forestry office. For 30 minutes they drove. Their hair never budged. It was all sticking straight out. And it was the weirdest thing. So my guys' group, they were snickering and laughing. It's kind of funny. Look at that guy. Look at, they go badass, and he's got his hair and he's crying, and they started fighting among each other, not physically, but yelling and screaming. So anyway, they get to the forestry office. A couple of the guys get out and they just start running, and they never came back. They just kept running down the road, and they were never seen again. They didn't disappear like they were dead, but they never came back to work ever. They were gone. Long story short, the forestry guys come out and say, did all of you see this stuff? Did all of you, the guys that had their hair sticking out did not see a Sasquatch. They never mentioned seeing one, but they were scared of them. They knew that's what it was, but they never saw one. And Sibylla Irwin, she does all the artwork in my book. Are you familiar with Sibylla? Yeah, she's really good. I wish I had that picture. I have it on my camera, on my computer, but I can't show it to you because it's in a file. So, but anyway, these 4 guys run it. So anyway, what they basically said was, this didn't happen. You didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything. You didn't see any footprints. There's no Sasquatch. Didn't happen. You say another word, you're fired. You'll never work in this business again. And they even split up my guy, David Allen, that's his name in the book. They split his crew up, and they put each one of them on different crews. Like they take one guy and put it on another crew, one of the others, so they wouldn't have anybody to talk to with. A couple of days later, they went to the local bar where everybody kind of hangs out, all the forestry guys. It's kind of where there's just a hangout in the local bar, whatever town they're in. And there is a Native American, indigenous peoples tree planting crew, and they were the best. They were the fastest, most efficient workers. And they heard about the story, and he said, well, what do you think about that? And they said, we've discussed it with our elders. We, of course, cannot speak about this with you, but the elders are aware of what happened. Because the Native Americans, they don't talk about that stuff. It's their heritage, and it's handed down from generation to generation. There's no written record of it other than pictographs from a long time ago. So it's just, we don't talk about that. But there was the threat. Just like the Forestry Service, just like I've surmised, and now I got it from the horse's mouth, this didn't happen. You say a word, you're done, or worse. And so to this day, 25 years later, I think, they're called the hash crew because they thought they were all smoking hash. It's kind of funny. As to him, it's insulting, but they call it, oh yeah, you were on the hash crew back then in the early 70s, right? Yeah, I remember, I heard about you. So, but there's the thing. They never saw a Sasquatch, but they knew that's what it was. My guy and his group saw all these hundreds of prints, and he's identified the prints very, very specifically. They have a perfect oval, and it turns into, it's like a bullseye. It's like that, hypnosis thing you see going round and around. It's a perfect spiral, and it ends in a little dot on their foot, because he could see the prints in the dust on the road. Hundreds of prints. A Sasquatch is attacking us. Our hair is standing on it, and even the foreman and the head guy at the plant, the crew cabin saw it. He was going, I don't know what you guys did or doing. I don't know what's going on, but there's something off here. So anyway, that's a cover up from the ground up, from the forest country, the lumber company, and do this again. You'll never work again. Just like an airline pilot seeing a UFO, you report that, you're done. In fact, never mind, you're fired anyway. I don't want you talking to anybody. So, I mean, it's the same. If you're a former law enforcement, right? So if you see this, don't tell me about it, because I don't want to have to fire you. I don't know how you all worked that kind of stuff, if you got called to UFOs or prowler calls that turned out to be something else. But you may or may not have had that kind of protocol in place where we don't talk about that if you want to still carry your badge. I know there are places like that. I had a report like that from, of all places, Louisiana. So, but what do you do with that? These guys come running out of the forest full speed. Their eyes are bulging out of their head, and their hair is just like standing up. Like, what do you say to that? I mean, you've got 12 witnesses and the foreman, and the crew chief. I mean, it covers all of it, how their hair stand up like that. What made my guys just suddenly so giddy and delirious? There's much more to the story, minutia, other things they saw, like, but that's the gist of the story. The other stuff is kind of pedestrian as far as this goes, but from the horse's mouth, it's, and that kind of stuff goes on. You say another word, you're dead, or you're fired. I won't say you're dead.
Yeah, I've had so many stories like that, Carter, that people have told, not like that, but with the strangeness, the high strangeness that people talk about. It has opened my mind and opened my whole world up to, there's got to be something to parallel universes. There's got to be something to this interdimensional thing, because nothing else makes sense. It's like the other cryptids, right? There's so many different cryptids out there, like I mentioned earlier. And I'm not necessarily talking about the Loch Ness monster and things that I consider to be more lore than facts.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Dogman, for example.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of shows on Dogman now. I had Jody Cook. I interviewed him recently he'll be an upcoming show on the Paranormal Odyssey. Jody has been investigating Dogman for decades. And I said to him, like, it just does not compute to me that this thing can be a flesh and blood creature that's roaming around undiscovered in North America and in other continents and other countries, right? And there are certain people that say, and I think Jody's sort of open to the fact that it may be alien in nature. It could be something paranormal, but I mean, how do you wrap your brain around the connection to those really out there things? Because I know you've had other experiences that were pretty mundane with Bigfoot, that would lead you maybe to believe that it's just a flesh and blood creature doing flesh and blood things. And then you have the experiences, like you said, on the FLIR, where this thing just disappears. Poof, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the trackways, right? I see these trackways and people say, hey, here's a Bigfoot tracks, and they just stop. There's a couple of tracks and then they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind used to go to, well, that's probably faked, right? They used some stompers. They did 6 or 8 tracks and then they're done. But could there be another explanation? Could this thing have actually went through some sort of a portal into another dimension, and that's why the trackway ended? I don't know.
Can't say no. Can't say you can't say no. And and how do I wrap my head around this? You ask. Well, it's just like I consider the source number one. I consider any experiences I may have had firsthand that reconcile some of what they're saying. That's the main thing. And other than that, unless I can prove, and a lot of them don't have any pictures or anything to say, they just got a story. And again, they don't want anything, and they're so relieved, when they get through talking. And, a couple of people are broken down crying why they were telling me, the wife was crying, or even the husband. A couple of I had to take a moment, when they're talking about something, because it affects them so deeply that like I said earlier, we're taught how to think, and my world is this. I get up, I go to I go to school, I go to my job, I go to church, meet a girl, meet a guy, have some babies, get a house, we do our thing and go off, and that's it. And that's my world. And I see a Sasquatch or a UFO or an orb or a Mothman or Dogman. Well, I can't see that. They don't exist. Well, yes, they do exist. You saw it. It's your reality. Now, nobody can take that away. The person who really tries to take it away from them the most is themselves. I didn't see that, but there's no way. I've seen weird stuff, and personally, I believe they can do either. They are flesh and blood, and they have the skill sets to come and go as they please. I believe that is something we just can't explain right now. That's my belief system right now. Do I believe everything that everybody tells me? Mostly, but I have to have an open mind. I can't just discount it because, well, that's out there. Okay, I had a woman said she saw, 7 Sasquatches herding 75 deer, and they were, killing them left and right and carrying off the bodies to, up the mountains and to take them to go eat and everything. I mean, just how do you, they don't want anything. They just want to tell the story. Their name's not going to be in lights. They can't say, oh, look, that book that you wrote, that's me. He doesn't know it. I mean, you don't know it, but that's me. Well, what kind of a hoax is that? That's stupid. So I consider the source. I consider anything I've had to do, any experiences that I've had that would reconcile that situation, so I can kind of explain it. I do research what I can, and I've had some things that happened to me and my wife. I'm having weird things happen in our house, that when you talk to some people believe that Sasquatch can follow you home. Their spirits can follow you, This book right here, you see this log here. There's 5 rocks here, and there's one at the other end. I'll get back to that in a minute, but I won't explain it. But, at the time that this event and this book was happening, 300 miles away, this is the expedition I led for BFRO in 2019 in Illinois. And at the time that this event was going on a Wednesday night, for me, my wife sees a blue orb flying through our bedroom. And not only does she see it in real life, she's also seeing it reflected in the mirror. So it's not like it's coming from a car passing our bedroom window, which is, by the way, it's impossible because we're covered with trees. But, she saw it in the room, and then she saw it over here in the mirror. So it was a real thing. And it was moved. The reflection was moving as it was moving in the room. It coincided. So it was a real thing. We've had some weird things going on in our house when I've been having some Sasquatch events other places, and I think maybe it's possible. I talked, Mike Patterson. They follow him home. They're in his house. They pop in whenever. He's had marbles come through his wall, just materialize in his house and fall at his feet. I mean, he's got some esoteric, but he's got a very long relationship with several people. Neff, I think, is one of the creatures that he's got named, and they've got a family, and they've got their footprints, and they show him the footprints and how they're growing, and he comments on it, and they tell it in so many ways. So how do you, there's too many rational, real people that are intelligent, and they have no reason. He's not getting rich off of any of this. I'm not getting rich off of any of this. You're not getting rich. We're transferring evidence and stories that people tell us, and I wouldn't be talking about them if I didn't believe them. I mean, I'm convinced. I'm more it's not that I'm convinced they're convinced. I'm convinced that there is something happening. You know, so my wife used to say, well, I believe that you believe. Oh, you quit patronizing me. Dude, that's not it. So I took her to somewhere and I showed her what's going on. And I didn't, how when you take somebody somewhere, you say, I'm going to show you this is where something happened. I'm going to show you, maybe we'll get lucky. That never happens, Well, I took her to one of my research areas and it did happen. It was hilarious, and I was the one who was more freaked out than she was, and I was hallucinating and I knew what was going on and I couldn't fight it. I was being made to see something that was not like it was. And she was reacting differently to what I think was probably an infrasound or some type of hypnosis. But I just I can't say never. I can't say no to any of this stuff. It is just it's shocking. And my guy in Canada, well, there's creatures walking, reaching his hand through the wall in his house and zapping him with his hand and pulling back, and then he's effectively dead. And the other female squats that was there, it's a long story. We'd have to do a whole show on just this guy, but it's just, they've been messing with him and his dad since he was 13. He's 66 now. So what, 53 years, give or take. He really only knew what was going on for about 40, 45 when he finally figured out, oh, a Sasquatch. Oh, I finally saw one. Oh my, that's what, oh, geez. He was still freaked out, but at least it explained some of the weird stuff, gifting appearing in his house when he's got it locked up. His house is locked, his cabin's locked, his windows are locked, gifts appearing in his, dead dragonflies and blue jay feathers in his house when he's gone, just appearing, because they're trying to teach him some things. The Sasquatch that have adopted him, he thinks, and I think too, that they are assigned to educate him or to protect him or guard him or something. They have attached themselves to him, and they come around at quite often at some inconvenient times. He's lost one marriage and several very good girlfriends because of this stuff, just popping in and out. And what was that? Oh, that's just my secret friend. Don't worry about it. Because you just try to poo-poo it off, and then of course you really can't, because it is what it looks like. And I think I'm leaving. Thank you. Nice knowing you. Gone.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I did a show recently about the Betty and Barney Hill UFO abduction. I had Kathleen Martin on. She's she ran some parts of MUFON in the past, and she was Betty and Barney Hill's niece, and she was actually there when they had their encounter and their ultimate abduction. And that's one of the things I asked Kathleen about: people who have experiences over and over and over again, particularly with aliens, but I guess it could apply with anything, even with Sasquatch on some level. I asked her, are you finding these patterns where people are having multiple abductions and multiple encounters with UFOs? And she was like, absolutely. It's almost like a generational thing for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's generational psychosis. I believe that it's generational in that, like you said, this guy and his parts of his family have been having these experiences for decades. And it blows my mind that that's happening. I don't understand it, but like you said, I can't poo-poo it. I can't say, well, that's not true, because they're having these experiences and they are their experiences. And I think it's fascinating. And that's why a lot of people, I'm sure probably people have turned the show off or just chosen not to listen because they don't believe it. Right. And that's their prerogative. But
yeah,
I think if enough people open their mind to this and start accepting there may be more to this, we'll get more answers ultimately. And that's ultimately what it's about for me, is the answer at the end of the day. Because the truth never lies in the extremes. It always lies somewhere in the middle. And that's where I try to focus, is somewhere in the middle always.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Betty and Barney Hill, that's an iconic story. I think I've read that a half a dozen times. He's a black man and she's a white woman. The last thing you're going to do is call attention to yourself in the late 50s, early 60s, when racial tensions were at an all-time high. And you're going to you're begging for trouble, when you talk about that in public, because you're married to a white woman and you shouldn't be marrying a white woman, or you're married to a black man, you shouldn't be married to a black man. Horrible, horrible stigma with that. So for them to come forward, that in and of itself is like, you got some balls on you if you're going to talk about that with the threat possibly of imminent violence, just because people don't like that, and there's still some like that today. So I always thought that was like iconic. And she drew that star system and all that stuff. I mean, how do you fake that? I mean, they wouldn't know that. Neither one of them were the type to know that stuff until they got regression hypnotist, and then they found out all the stuff. And Barney, he's sobbing uncontrollably about being taken and all that, and I know that firsthand, and that's a whole other story. I've had the same thing happen to me. But here's a story that I think you might find interesting, is that I did another show, it was about 6-8 weeks ago, the Pork and Bean Show. You familiar with Brian Bland?
I've never heard of that. No.
Yeah. Anyhow, the Pork and Beans, he's pork and his partner's beans. And so they're actually up in Canada. I've done a couple of shows. I'm doing another one here end of the month. But his partner is this long-haired, hippie-looking guy. He's probably 60 some odd years old. He had long hair down to the middle of his back, like I used to before, whatever happened to me. So, but we were talking about what you and I are talking about right now. And when he was in his 30s or 40s, he did a study for the government. And there were, I can't remember how many people that were in on this study. They contacted people from all over the world, several million, as I understand, that had been abducted. And the question was, what or who did you see on the craft? If you were awake when you were taken on the craft, who or what did you see on the craft that in your opinion was obviously not an abductee? And so they would name off the tall grays, the small grays, which I think are probably androids or robotic of some nature, the Nordics, the reptilians, Sasquatch. And it took, I can't remember how many years, 7, 8, 9, 10 years to interview. These are people from all over the world, not just United States, that had been abducted, and they were awake and they remembered or saw pretty much everything. And and so that ties into, and I've heard other people say the same thing. Well, I saw a Sasquatch right after this UFO landed, or I saw a UFO right after the Sasquatch disappeared, and there was a UFO, or there was a Squatch when the UFO left. I mean, and I initially used to equate that with, well, humans are abducted all the time on our planet, for reproductive and DNA studies, cattle mutilations, horses and other animals are abducted and taken for DNA and whatever they do with us. And so if they're awake and they see all that, and they're just telling you, well, I saw a Sasquatch. And I used to think that if I saw a Sasquatch, or I heard of a Sasquatch report where there was a UFO involved, I assumed the Sasquatch were being taken like other humans, other samples, life on Earth samples. Maybe they probably take deer and a snapping turtle, and a chickadee. I mean, whatever they need the DNA study for to make whatever it is they're making. But I used to think that was just a coincidence. But people are starting to tell me things like that, and they didn't see him on the craft, but they saw it right before, right after. They saw one right before, right after the sighting of the other. And you hear that a few times. I'm starting to get a few dogman reports. And that's not my area of expertise, but people are finally now, after they tell me their story, they go, well, now you're not going to believe this. I got something really crazy to tell you. I said, well, you just told me you saw a Sasquatch, a creature that doesn't exist. You got something better than that? Hit me up. Let's bring it, And so they start telling me, I just took this report. I think it's not even a year ago. It got published in BFRO. south of Harrisonville, probably about 50, 60 miles from me, south of me. A guy saw a white Sasquatch. Him and his girlfriend saw a white Sasquatch. And after it disappeared, they saw Anubis, is what he told me. He said, it's like the Brendan Fraser movie, The Mummy. It was just like that. It was a tall, broad shoulder, skinny as a rail, long snout, ears, and walking through this cornfield. It didn't see it from the knees down at first because there was, corn rubble still there. Then when it came out, the legs were backward, just like a dog. And he just, and the place is called Amarugia Conservation Area. And there's Native American lore that goes back several hundred years about sightings of Sasquatch and other beings. Most guys that see things, when they do, they don't see both. You see one or the other, And so, but this guy and another person gave me the same kind of story. He just said, well, I saw this, it had to be a dog, and I think it was a dog man. I saw a Sasquatch and I could hardly believe that. And then, about 20 minutes later, I see this other creature. I thought it was a Sasquatch coming back to get me or something. That was nothing like that. It was something else entirely. So if I believe one part, I'm not going to disbelieve the other. I mean, you're truthful, you're factual, you correct me on minutia, which is something hoaxers won't do. And all you hoaxers, take a listen now. If you want to show that you're not hoaxing, have a lot of good minutia. You'll confuse us researchers. We don't know what to do with that. So make sure if you're going to hoax, do it right. But it's just bizarre. So what do you do with that? And I'm going to do the show again. I'm going to ask him about that because I want to get some kind of direction to go. Like, is there a place where that study was published anywhere? And I think I asked, and we got to talk about it something else. But what do you do with stuff like that? I mean,
yeah, I've had somebody on the show in the past who he was a conductor on a train, and he and the three other guys, there's two or three other guys in the engine of the train, saw a Bigfoot crossing the railroad tracks. And he had a lot of details. He was very hesitant to come on and even share that story. He had other things happen to him out in the woods. And that was the only sighting he had, but he'd seen tracks and taken some pictures and gathered evidence and things like that. But we're talking, and he hesitantly told me before we started the interview, and I asked him if he would be okay sharing, he saw a chupacabra in New Mexico on a trip to see his girlfriend's family or whatever down there. And this guy I had to press him to tell the story because he was very much, he said, I love your show. I respect your show. And I don't want people thinking you're crazy or I'm crazy because I'm going to tell a chupacabra story on your show. But I was like, it's relevant, dude. I believe that you saw Bigfoot, right? I can't discount that you saw something that you're calling chupacabra. And he described it to her parents, and they're like, well, yeah, that's what it looks like. It's just like a thing they know exists. Now, is it a mangy dog, or is it some crazy looking armadillo? I don't know, but he described it as the typical chupacabra sighting, and he didn't want to tell me because he didn't want me to think he didn't want me to think he was crazy. So it's like you say, what do you do with that? I believe his Bigfoot encounter, but I don't believe that he saw a chupacabra. Well, that makes no sense, because
why don't you take the other stance and believe in the chupacabra and not the Sasquatch?
There you go, right?
Is one more believable than the other? No, I mean, and some of this, this seems to be coming around here in the last few years, and the old hippie in me is thinking, we're going through these weird times right now. And maybe this is kind of a revelatory time where things are going to become clearer, and the world that we are in is not what we think it is, and there's more to it. Why would they lie to us about UFOs? well, to protect you because, they might could be bad aliens. They might shoot you with a laser beam. I say, well, if they can do that, I'm gone anyway. So, what protecting me? How are you going to protect me? Is there a laser proof suit? What is your end game to protect us? I think there's more to all of that. There's more to the UFO. They know about life elsewhere on other planets. They could be living here in the earth, underground, under the seas, in the deep cave systems all over the country, Dulce, New Mexico, all of that stuff, So that's entirely possible. If they can cloak and disappear and go over here 2 inches and they're a whole other dimension and you're staring at them and they're not, you just see nothing, but they're staring at you. And, who's to say that, doesn't exist? We use what 4 dimensions, height, weight, depth, and time is the fourth dimension that we've created. Your time is a human construct. There's not another animal in the world that uses a clock except us, because we need help. We can only see 1 or 2% of the entire light spectrum, and we don't know what else is out there. We have no idea. We can only see our spectrum, and it's very narrow field. So, the government know exactly what's going on, and they're just piecemealing it to us as they have to, or as it fits an agenda. That's what irritates me, because we all deserve, you, Brian, me, Carter, everybody deserves to know what's going on in the world. We all inhabit together. If there's a gigantic universal force that's out to get us, we deserve to know that so we can become one and maybe take care of ourselves. The whole thing is just you got conspiracy and all that written all over it, but there is something going on. All these people, what I'm thinking we are coming to a time. I don't think it's the end times and the revelation in the Bible, but I think we are coming to an age of enlightenment that we need to get down to brass tacks and find our inner peace and be aware of the world around us and open our mind to the possibility, because I think these the Sasquatch are here to take care of us. They've been here long before we got here. They'll be here long after we're gone, and they're caretakers of the planet, is what I believe. That they're watching over us. They don't really interfere because we're gonna the aliens, the ETs, they don't interfere much. We've heard some things about them disabling our nuclear warheads and things of that nature to keep us from killing ourselves and offing ourselves. And they may know that if we do a certain thing at a certain time, we may annihilate the planet. So they do get involved. And Sasquatch, I think it's more of a Mother Earth type thing. We need to nurture the earth and take care of our resources and our planet, and greenhouse gases and drilling and all that stuff. We need to stop all that. There's another way to live. We just don't want to because there's money, at the other end of the pie. So anyway, but it's just fascinating, and you probably get some crazy, far out stories on your show. It's got to be very fascinating to hear all that kind of stuff, because it just, when you've talked to a nutcase, and you don't talk to that many.
That's true. I've said it often. My bullshit meter is like on point, because I spent 16 years in law enforcement, and I had to be that way, right? I've got the BS meter dialed in, and like you said, the many people, for every person you hear on the show, I probably talk to 10 other people that don't make it on the show, and some of them are for that reason. If they're a nutcase, I don't deal with that on the show, right? But that has been few and far between. I think it's maybe happened twice since I've been doing both shows. So it is what it is. I believe the people that I've had on the show have had some sort of genuine encounters. It's just not up to me to decide if everything they're telling me is 100% legit. I don't sit in judgment. I'm just the conduit. I bring the stories out there, very much like your books, right? You're the conduit. You have those encounters with people, you talk to them, and then you bring it out and you say, here's the story, do with it what you want. So that's sort of what my show has become for me. And I love doing the show, man. I look forward to it every single week when I get to sit down and talk to, I'm doing 3-4 interviews a week sometimes with people. And I love it. I love connecting with people. I love hearing their stories. I love sharing the stories and hearing people's reactions to the stories. I just think it's fascinating. And I think it's very important. I've said it over and over. I think these anecdotal stories are evidence in and of themselves to patterns of behavior. What's happened to people in British Columbia, Canada, has also happened to people in South Florida and here in North Carolina, and just all around. I did the show that I was editing earlier with David Ellison Julie Ranch. They they're playing sounds that she's recorded in the Uwharrie National Forest here in North Carolina. I've heard on my property here 3 hours away, and they've also been recorded in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Almost identical sounds.
Mhm.
How do you explain that if there's not something to it, right? There's got to be something to it. Everything's connected, right? I
Yeah.
said it earlier. Everything's connected. If you wouldn't mind, I want to be respectful of your time. And before we close out, you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to share. Are you willing to share your UFO story?
For $20.
I'll Venmo you.
Yeah, and here's yeah, and it didn't. So what is it? 7:30. So we got about another half hour or so. Yeah. One thing I was going to ask you. So you basically started this just Sasquatch only, and now you're branching to paranormal, and that is because you're hearing more of the paranormal. That's the same thing with my Sasquatch research. Now, I've been with BFRO for 12 years. I've had very close to 100 reports published to BFRO. That's published, like you can look them up, they're online, they're in there. You know, after about halfway through that number, I probably talked to 350 to 400 people in my 12, 13 years doing this to get those 100 reports published. You know, there's some that just don't make it. But about halfway through that number of 100, about 50, 50, 51, 52, somewhere in there, people started telling me other things. Just like you started probably hearing other things and you decided to do a paranormal show. People started telling me things, and some of them were very deeply disturbed, emotionally affected, seriously, relationships lost, one, jobs lost and one, all that kind of stuff. And so there is sort of a coming of age of all of this, because more people are coming forward because more people are tired of sitting on and being quiet. So even though my primary research is Sasquatch, I'm open to other things, but that, I'm sticking with the Sasquatch because that's been my experience base. So my wife and myself and I did comedy for about 7-8 years. So we had a trio. So my comedy partner, he passed away, but I stayed good friends with his widow, Nancy. So my wife, myself, Nancy, and her new husband, Steve, we decided one day we wanted to go see if we had past lives and try some regression hypnosis. And so there's a place out here near Missouri, in Sibley, Missouri, where she had a big maze where you could go out and just walk and meditate and chill out. Then she'd take you into her barn that had been converted into a really nice studio. And at the time I got hypnotized, I think I was sitting on a hay bale. She had just opened it. So she had some chairs where the hay bales are actually more comfortable. So anyway, they take my wife under. She couldn't go under because some people just can't. She has a control issue that some people just can't go under. And Nancy went under, and she was a medicine woman, actually a medicine man, and she was a fisherman on a trawler in the North Atlantic wearing a yellow slicker back in the 1900s. And she was fishing and catching fish, and the boat almost capsized. Then her husband was alive in the Atlantean times. He was in the Phoenician era, and he was a priest, not a high priest, but he was just a priest that had some duties. And he described his robe and all that kind of stuff. So it was all pretty cool. We just want to see if we had past lives, and they see if you have a spirit animal that guides you through your lives and all that kind of stuff. So she takes me under, and I start talking like a 10-year-old kid, and I'm bawling. I'm sobbing uncontrollably. And all my friends are sitting there, they're watching this, and I'm hearing it. I'm hearing myself say it, and I'm reliving what was an abduction. Now, when I was 10, I've always had this story. I'm gonna backtrack because this makes sense. Since I was 10, I I've always had this story I told you. You ever told stories about stupid stuff you do when you're a kid? Like, I should have been killed. I don't know how come I didn't get killed. I don't know how come that tree didn't follow me, or that electric wire didn't kill me, or whatever. So I always had this story I told of me and Craig Whaley, my good buddy from high school, junior high and high school. We were racing our brand new bikes we got for Christmas, and we were racing in my neighborhood, and we ran a stop sign, broad daylight. We just ran a stop sign. Phew, this car goes by, and just you could feel the wind. It just barely missed us. Oh my God, we almost got killed. Oh my God, don't tell my mom, because it happened right in front of my house. No, I won't tell. Don't tell my mom. I'm not going to say anything. And so we went about and raced our bikes and did our thing, and that was it. Well, I get taken under, and I'm describing an abduction where that blue car that blew by me, it was a screen memory. It was not a car. It was a spacecraft that took us on board. And they took me. It was one of those typical things where Craig was behind kind of a veil. I could see shadows and stuff. I could hear him screaming and yelling. And I was just kind of laying there going, what's going on? What's going on? I could see some shadows in front of me, and another kind of curtain where there were creatures behind this thing. Was kind of a veil where I really couldn't make them out, but obviously they were the gray types, you know, the big head, big eyes, and all. You could see through it. It was somewhat sheer, but I could see it. Anyway, so when I came out of the trance, everybody was like, they just were speechless. And the hypnotist, she was like, she did not know how to deal with this. Now, I mentioned Dolores Cannon earlier. If you look her up, Dolores Cannon, 2 N, C-A-N-N-O-N, like, you know, but anyway, world-renowned hypnotist. She's got 36 books. She's passed away about 7 years ago. Her daughter still run her operations down in Arkansas. Well, this woman who took me under was a student of Dolores Cannon. And so I thought, well, I've got somebody pretty good to do this hypnotic regression, because she's a student of the master. So that's why we went to her in the first place, you know. So we are riding home, and they're all going, what the blankety blank what were you talking about? I said, I don't know. The story I remember is not the story I just told you. The story I thought I was riding my bike and this car almost ran me over. See, I'm getting chills when I tell the story now. It's freaking me out. So not in a bad way. It's just like, you know. And so came home, and uneventful night. I wake up the next morning, and I come into my office here, and I draw a reptilian. I don't know how to draw. I mean, I just drew this reptilian with all the little scales, and I colored it, and it had little tufts of hair, and I drew this thing. I said, where'd that come from? So I scanned it, and I emailed it to the hypnotist. I said, what is this? This is what I drew. I think this is what I think I saw. I'm not sure, but can you help me? What is this? She called me and said, I tell you what, I can't handle this. I'm not equipped to deal with this. You probably need to find somebody else. Don't call me about this anymore. I can't handle it. That was the end of the conversation. That was it. I'm going, well, gee, thanks. Can I have my $400 back for the hayride? You know? So I'm still not answering my question. So I go to another woman who I find. She's down in Springfield, Missouri. And so I go to her, and I already knew what I was looking for at this time. I said, I think I had an event back when I was a 10-year-old kid. I just want to know if something happened. I think it did. And so she takes me under, and I've got all of these sessions on tape. And I think it was 2005 when I finally found out all of this. I've been telling that blue car almost run me over story for 40 years of my life, you know, and had no idea what it was. She takes me under, the second woman, and she goes, do you remember any of that? I said, well, no, I remember a story that I've always told, because it's, you know, and apparently it's a screen memory. You know, they made me see a blue Buick. This really ties in. It's really cool. You're going to like this at the end. So I go, okay, well, that's just weird. So I finally get an appointment with, I said, I'm going to go to the horse's mouth. I'm going to go to the teacher instead of the student, because this is, you know, some baloney. So I went under with Dolores Cannon twice. And I guarantee if you look her up, you'll be impressed. She's like, the cat's meow. You know who John Mack is? Same thing. Now, she's not a psychiatrist, but he is a registered hypnotist, and all the people start coming to him and telling all their stories. Anyway, so I go to her and I go in twice with her. And so then I come up with two other events that really are screen memories for what really happened. I always had this other memory, like the blue car, of me and Craig. We go fishing. We fished this place in Dallas called Castleman's Pond. This happened back in Texas. And I remember casting and I heard him screaming. I was looking around behind him and I caught his neck with my hook. And I was trying to unsnag it from a tree, and I was pulling his skin like, eek, 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 and I'm going, oh, gee, God, Craig, I'm sorry. I'll stop doing that. I'm sorry. You okay? And then I had another screen memory of this pond we used to fish at, had a dike, and it was, the pond was an acre or less. And on this dike was a black funeral carriage, a horse-drawn funeral carriage. Beautiful thing with brass lights. It had leather. It was a leather-clad stagecoach. It was a funeral. It was a hearse, but horse-drawn. And I'm going, where did that come from? That wasn't here. We're fishing, and all of a sudden it appeared. Well, the screen memory of me seeing his skin getting yanked was not. That wasn't it. It was. I watched an operation. I watched them do a procedure on him. This is what Dolores told me. And then the hearse, which I don't know it could have been just another craft. And that's what we happened to see, because Castleman's Pond, where we were fishing, was people boarded horses there. So we would expect to see, maybe a carriage or something. This would be in the mid-60s, roughly. So it wouldn't be unusual to see a horse carriage, but not a funeral carriage. So those two were screen memories. Dolores tells me, well, you weren't the one that were taken. They were after your friend Craig. You were just collateral damage because you guys were there. And I said, well, how come I don't remember? I said, you'll remember when you're supposed to. Something will click on in your brain. So that was my UFO thing, and it blew me away. And I have 7 or 8 tapes. I'm going to listen to them through once because I don't think I'll get any more information from them than what I've just told you. But it was like I had no idea that the story I've been telling. Being a dumbass little kid, almost getting my butt run over on a bike because I just ran a stop sign in broad daylight right in front of my house, was not what it was. And here's the weird part. My wife and I, this was years after that, probably about 10 years ago, be about 5, 6 years after that, we decided we want to start having collector cars, and refix. And, right now we have a 59 Thunderbird convertible. That's our only car. The first car that I bought was a 1951 Buick Roadmaster. The car that was used for a screen memory was a blue Buick, probably a 1949 that was had the real long humpback, and it was blue, and my grandparents had one. And that's where I had seen that car. Maybe they had that memory in my head and they used that for my screen memory so I'd identify with the car and not a craft. Just like people are given screen memories when you're abducted by the Greys, you see either owls or deer, something with big eyes. So, well, God, what was that? Well, oh, it must have been a deer. Wow. Okay. That deer, that was kind of creepy, but that was a deer. Okay, whatever. You wake up and go about your life. So how that just came full circle, that, and I didn't put it together that we bought that Buick until I went, God, my Meepaw and Meepaw, they had a blue Buick. It sat in their garage. I always thought that was a really cool looking car. And it turns out that's the first car we bought together to ground up restore. And then all the other stuff with it was just screen memories of what really happened on that craft. I can't, I can't prove it or disprove it. But, if you got 4 people sitting there watching you get hypnotized and you start talking like a 10-year-old boy and crying your eyes out. I mean, when I woke up, there was tears in my eyes going, what's going on? I had no idea. Crazy.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. It-
you know,
I don't even know what to say, because it's like you said, you hear about screen memories, and you hear about people. I've talked to people who've had multiple abductions in the past, and I'm just sitting in awe listening to the stories. But it's a very traumatic thing for a lot of people, and some people have memories, and then some people have to go through regression. And the screen memories have always fascinated me. Like you said, I could probably do 5 shows on just abductions alone and
yeah.
screen memories and the things that people report. It's absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate you sharing that. I know.
Yeah, I mean, I've shared it a couple of times. It's just, and uh, when I started realizing that that's what was going on, and then I've had other things. So it kind of ties in, because if we believe these ETs can come and go, and the government and the military pretty much say they do, they come at will because they can do whatever they want, because we can't do anything about them. We don't even know what they're made of, or how, and I guarantee that's baloney too. They know exactly what's going on. We're just being kept from it. If you go into the Eisenhower Truman era, when they had a deal made with the ETs, we let you take some humans for experimentation, and we'll give you some technology, laser and Kevlar and circuit boards and all that kind of stuff. Whole nother story, whole nother show. But but if these craft can come and go, who's to say a Sasquatch can't come and go interdimensionally? Bend light, change their vibrational frequencies. I mean, if you believe that is possible, how can you not believe that something that looks like a big gigantic ape has powers far beyond ours? And so how can you just can't, like you said, throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to put it all in a big bowl. Like in my book, I say it's the Brussels sprouts theory. If you don't like them, you just hate them. You don't like them, I'll never eat them. I'm gonna put them on my plate and pretend to eat them, so my host is not insulted. I'll spread them around. I might take a bite and put them down, and but I'm not going to eat it. But I'm going to at least consider it, at least make it look like it for my host. Well, same thing with the Sasquatch, ET, Dog Man, anything. How can you say yes to one and no to the other? You got to go throw it all out or put it all on the plate. Some of it may not work. Later on, you find out, okay, that theory was no good, but well, it was good theory while I had it, but at least it got me to thinking. That's all I'm doing is keep the thought process going. So you throw that out. Well, I'll throw out those 2 Brussels sprouts, that didn't count. And you get the point. You just can't discount one because of all the rest, or you can't discount all the rest because of one. You got to have an open mind. There's no sin in considering things. There's no sin at all. I mean, it could be, how do we get to the moon and all this other stuff? Well, there's experiments that were done. Think of all the experiments that were failures, and you got to the one that did work. Well, okay, it's the same thing with Sasquatch and UFOs and paranormals and, Dog Man and orbs. You're going to come to the answer one day, but if you're one of the guys sitting there, well, that can't be, I'll back and watch my Lawrence Welk show reruns, and I'll just be happy. So what you just have to have an open mind. That's all it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's just have an open mind and at least consider stuff. And if you think that guy is a nut telling you this Sasquatch story, what if it was your wife? What if it was your husband or your grandpa telling you the same story? What would you think of them? Because I'm a stranger and you know them, that story gives it more validity? Not really. Grandpa could be full of crap. I could be full of crap. Neither is the case. But what I'm saying is, if you think that person's a nut, you think Brian's nut for having this show, well, no, he's not, because what if it was your wife with this show? Oh, she's awesome. Gosh, she's great. She has great guests. Her show's great. Well, it's just hypocritical to not at least consider it. If you want absolute great proof, well, you're going to have to wait, because like I say, there's no experts that we know of. There's a few, obviously, that they have bodies, they know what's going on, but there's some people that know it all, but we aren't that. We aren't there. We are not worthy.
Maybe one day we'll get there, Carter. So tell us about the books and where we can find them. I want to send people to get your books. What's the latest one and where's the best place to get it from you?
Okay, these two books, these are my original books, Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma 1 and 2. There's a great story on here, but I didn't have time. You can go to www.relichominid.com. These books are in color, and I've got them on there. PayPal is how you pay for them. They're really nice books. But they're very colored. They're very nice paper and all that. This new book, Sasquatch Down the Rabbit Hole of Strangeness, is this book with a new cover and one more chapter and about another 10 pages. It's Beyond the Frame. You can get that on Amazon. I think it's $14.95. And it's black and white. It's not color, other than the cover. And that's my only issue with it. It's when I got pictures of a forest, I really hate to have a black and white tree when you can put a green one, but they wanted to repackage it and get it out there. The book is actually on audiobooks and all formats of the book. So you can go to Amazon there. So Relic Hominid, RELICHOMINID.com. And I autograph all my books that I fill the orders. They're going to let me get rid of my stash, and then I can't compete with them anymore. I just, because, I get it. And the second book is going to be this book, but with probably a cover like this, and maybe just version 2. I don't know, we haven't got that far yet. So, Brian, this is awesome, man. I love your show. This is really, it's great talking to you. It's you're getting a baptism by fire by taking on the paranormal world. But I envy you because it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I
You get
love
to
it,
hear
man.
all
And
that.
I appreciate you coming on. I will link to all the books and the places that you can get them in the show notes for everybody who's interested. I suggest you go over and get your copies. And for those of you who haven't figured it out yet, we're doing this over Zoom, and there is video of our interview, and you get to see the books and you get to see Carter himself. And if you're not a member, you can go over to Patreon and search for Sasquatch Odyssey on Patreon and become a member, and you get access to the video. Carter, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Let's do it again when you got some time.
Absolutely, we will.
All right. Hey, Brian.
All right. That was awesome as usual, man.
Yeah. Coolness. And I have that very same color. My bath, our half bath has that blue color.
This is a tiny house. We live in a 400 square foot tiny house.
Wow, that's cool.
In the middle of the woods. And this room that I'm in is the supposed to be the back bedroom or whatever of the house. And it's been our